This is MrsAgroSquerril. I am standing in for Agro while he recovers over the next day or couple of weeks from vocal strain. I hope you enjoy. Imagine by Possible Letters 42. The Helix, Central Operational Command, Yarantolian Imperial Navy. Holy Seer Council hearings on active developments in Galactic Arm 5F. Telex-grade secrecy protocols enabled. Recording subject to Class 10 mnemonic erasure. Testimony of Overarch Falcon, Galactic Arm 5F Naval Command. Recording commences. Overarch Falcon, you may begin. Yes, High Seer. I suppose it makes the most sense to start with some basic facts that everyone present for these hearings should know. They bear repeating because everything that comes later hinges on them. Every known military power in the galaxy depends heavily on a number of finite factors. First, and most basic, is numbers. To man fleets and form armies, you need numbers. If martial success was based on power alone, Yarantolia never would have risen to prominence. It takes 20 of us to deal with an average Gerald berserker, but they only reproduce every 50 years, so we're destined to be a sparsely populated vassal. Nor are numbers everything, of course. Of the 3 hive species in the galaxy, none are in the top 10 in terms of military power, lacking the individual power and creative battlefield initiative that individual species possess. Still, all major military powers, Yarantolia of course at the forefront, straddle the line between reproductive rate, gestation period, and individual power. All of the leading military powers are similar to us, capable of reproducing in the billions, but each individual still a potent force. Second is fuel. The galaxy is a big place and FTL is demanding on fairly rare resources. This is self-explanatory. Third is materially specialized munitions. You can't build a heavy railgun piercer without tungsten or a quark shatter cannon without refined cobalt. This is really just a derivative of the fuel factor. One is fuel to travel, one is fuel to fight. Both are fuel for war. Fourth, and most relevant here, are Psychana shards. The difference being that you don't need these to fight the same way you need fuel and weapons. But you usually need them to win, certainly against a major power. The shards, of still unknown composition from the Great Unmaking approximately 8 billion galactic standard years ago. Rare, precious, consumable, and the only known way for species to channel the unique combat magics of their people. We thought all of these elements were universal to warfare. Then we met the humans. The territory held by the humans was replete with Psychana shards, unharvested. We were baffled by it. They weren't even trying to hide or protect them. Initial military recon reached the astonishing conclusion that humans were not at all aware of the power of the shards. Not only that, they were not aware of Psychana-empowered warfare at all. No majors in their ranks, either offensive or defensive. We were beyond stunned. It was like finding a spacefaring culture that somehow had not invented the airplane before rocketry. I truly wish we had known what cursed fast learners they were. Our frontline majors of average skill can imagine or focus magical walls, blasts of raw force, brief illusions, and the like. Not much, but enough to turn the tide at critical moments, absorb our artillery barrage, assassinate a general, create a diversion, which is how we and all other major military powers have generally used majors. In our wars, magic has served much as a sniper's long scyther, potent, but not decisive. We have a few that are more powerful for critical battles, but that rule generally holds. I am afraid that humans have changed their calculus, rather catastrophically. To explain the problem as bluntly as possible, the human imagination is potent to a degree previously thought impossible by advanced civilizations. As you know, if the consumable ammunition of Psychana attacks is a shard, the actual weapon is an imagination. Not only imagination, but imagination combined with focus. Our majors study for years to learn to mentally combine the right intensity of focus with the right creativity of imagination. We had no idea that humanity's past as hunters had given them a grasp of focus that, like their grasp of imagination, makes ours look like a particularly simple child's. We had, of course, completed initial pre-conquest recon prior to engagements. We knew about their incredible art, the music, the cinema, the paintings, the sculpture. It was partly because of an intense appetite to secure so productive a vassal that we invaded in the first place. The failure of our intelligence services to make the connection between human art and imagination is a failure that will haunt our society forever. We were so dazzled by sculpture and still life, so amused by situation comedies, that we barely paid any attention to genres they call fantasy and science fiction. A longer period of deep culture reconnaissance would have figured these things out. But we were impatient. I realize such a direct critique of the Holy See Council is punishable by death. However, I am afraid that does not concern me anymore. The first and last time I watched a Psychana-empowered human face one of our mages was on recuperation. The second colony of theirs we moved to take, a lightly defended medical ward, pleasant and soft. Even the insects don't bite. It was only supposed to be a field exercise to retrieve a baseline for future Psychana warfare. The humans had a mage on the field in the first engagement. Do you see? Do you begin to understand? The invasion had barely started. We had only destroyed one colony, but they learned from watching us what the shards were. That reconnaissance survived the first engagement, and the humans learned about the very existence of Psychana power, connected it to the shards on our mages' foreheads, harvested shards, and learned to use the power before the second battle. Believe me, we noticed, but we weren't unduly concerned. It was like seeing someone who had never shot before pick up a gun. Dangerous, but not especially if you have a gun as well. We knew that we could use it better. The soldiers waited, on my order. The human mage was opposed by a first-order Psychana colonel attached to the 19th Bavanian Regiment under my command. Callerol was his name. He had 113 victorious engagements under his belt, 4 draws, and no losses. I looked it up after. Callerol fell back on one of his standard form projections I had seen him use to terrible effect in prior engagements. A pair of 30-meter golems, one bearing an enormous halberd, the other an impossibly large bow. I could see the human mage's burst of terror, followed by confusion. Then she placed her hand on the shard, loosely tied to her forehead, closed her eyes, and nodded. She seemed to understand. She opened her eyes and smiled. Her projection, expansive, massive, and terrifying, consisted of 8 serpents, each at least 2 meters wide, which appeared to be actively growing, each a different color and bearing a different weapon. One had an enormous toothed maw, one spat flame, one dribbled acid, one crackled with electricity, and so on. They wrapped around the projected golems, squeezing and consuming. When they finally snapped tightly enough, Psychana Colonel Callerol's crystal shattered and he fell, dead on the spot. This human mage was nobody. Do you understand? She learned to use the shard in a tiny fraction of time compared to our students, grasped the concepts within, and defeated a first-order battle mage unassisted. Students of the Universica Psychania are required to undergo at least 5 years of classroom testing before they are considered qualified to deploy shards in the field. The human learned in a few weeks under duress. We really should have known it was over then, but we kept up the attack anyway. As I've said, magic in our battles is powerful, but not decisive. At least that used to be the case. Her dreadful serpents, now at least 6 meters wide each, separated from the ground and grew horrible furling wings. They absorbed every attack we had and laid waste to our troop formations. When we finally retreated, we thought it was over. But they even knocked landing craft out of the sky. When we left the system in retreat, they were visible in low orbit. He fell silent. Well, the High Seer demanded in a cold, brutal voice. I beg your pardon, High Seer? What is your strategy? How do we defeat these imaginative primates? You can still redeem your failure and disloyalty. We are not unaware of your many years of valor to the Empire. We can be merciful. A low chuckle, into a booming laugh. What is this insolence? Would you truly so openly defy your High Seer? You have forgotten your very honor. My apologies, High Seer. My mirth comes from beyond your present understanding. I didn't come here today to suggest a strategy to win. I requested this audience to propose a strategy for the survival of our species. Preposterous, treasonous. We have not been defeated in millennia, and will not be defeated by upstart primates. You have suffered one defeat for which you have only yourself to blame by retreating in disgrace, and now you have allowed yourself to become a coward? Let's hear it then, before we put you to death, for our amusement if nothing else. What is Overarch Falcon's vaunted survival strategy? Overarch Falcon tapped twice on the table with his foreclaw. In a shimmer of air, 6 humans flanked him, all with Psychana shards glowing softly on their foreheads, dull compared to the anger in their eyes. In another heartbeat, the entirety of the Holy Seer Guard was dead, engulfed in flame, ice, acid, plasma, lightning, fumes, and other magic esoterica. Staring blankly at the High Seer's gaping dread, Falcon deadpanned. I was thinking surrender. End of story.
I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Caspar Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.